Good afternoon and welcome to the August 24, 2022 City of Mesa Planning and Zoning Public Hearing. I'm Jeff Crockett. I'll be chairing the meeting today. We'll begin with a roll call. Chair Crockett, present. Vice Chair Ayers.
Here.
Board Member Allen is absent. Board Member Sarkisian.
Here.
Board Member Peterson.
Here.
And Board Member Pitcher.
Here.
Okay, we have a quorum, so we're going to push ahead. As part of our agenda today, we have a consent agenda. These items will be taken as a group and voted on as a group and not discussed separately. We do have a comment card on agenda item 4D, which is the Texas Roadhouse item. That is coming off of the consent agenda, and so we'll discuss that separately. But that's the only comment card that I have well, I have one other comment to read in on that item, but I don't have any comment cards on any other agenda items. So is there anything else from the public before we get to our consent agenda? I don't see anything, so all right. And Board Member Peterson has volunteered to read our consent agenda today, so So we'll turn it over to him for the reading of the consent agenda.
Items on the consent agenda for the August 24th, 2022 meeting are item 2A, minutes from the July 27, 2022 study session and regular meeting. Item 3A, ZON 21-01115, District 6 within the 3700 to 3900 blocks of South Haas Road, located south of Elliott Road on the west side of Haas Road, site plan review. This request will allow for a multiple residence development. Recommendation is approval with conditions. Item 4A, ZON 21-00966, District 2, within the 6100 block of East Main Street, located east of Recker Road on the south side of Main Street, rezoned from limited commercial LC to multiple residence 3 with a U designation and a planned area development overlay and site plan review. This request will allow for a multiple residence development. Staff recommendation is approval with conditions. Item 4B, ZON 21-00995, District 6, within the 8900 block of East Pecos Road, within the 7200 block of South 89th Place, and within the 8900 block of East Waltham Avenue, located west of Ellsworth Road on the south side of Pecos Road, rezoned from light industrial with a planned area development overlay to light industrial with a planned area development overlay and bonus intensity zone overlay. Site plan and site plan review. This request will allow for an industrial development. Recommendation is continue to the September 14, 2022 Planning and Zoning Board meeting. Item 4C, ZON 21-01271, District 4, within the 600 block of West University Drive, within the 300 block of North Hossack, and within the 300 block of North Date, located west of Country Club Drive on the south side of University Drive, rezoned from limited commercial and single residence 6 to multiple residence 4 with the planned area development overlay and site plan review. This request will allow for a multiple residence development. Recommendation is continue to the September 14, 2022 Planning and Zoning Board meeting. Item 4E, ZON 22-00263, District 2, within the 5600 to 5800 blocks of East Inverness Avenue and within the 5600 to 5800 blocks of South Sunview, located east of Higley Road and north of Baseline Road, rezoned from planned employment park with a planned area development overlay and conditional use permit to planned employment park with a planned area development overlay, light industrial with a planned area development overlay and site plan review. This request will allow for an industrial development. Recommendation is continue to the September 14, 2022 Planning and Zoning Board meeting. Item 4F, ZON 22-00436, District 5, within the 10,500 block of East Hampton Avenue and within the 1300 block of South 105th Place, located west of Signal Butte Road and south of Southern Avenue, rezoned from limited commercial with the planned area development overlay to multiple residence 3 with the planned area development overlay and site plan review. This request will allow for a multiple residence development. Recommendation is approval with conditions. Item 4G, ZON 22-00437, District 6, within the 9300 to 9600 blocks of East Germain Road, located east of Ellsworth Road on the north side of Germain Road, site plan review. This request will allow for an industrial warehouse and office development. Recommendation is approval with conditions. Item 4H, ZON 22-00535, District 1, within the 3900 block of East Oasis Circle and within the 2800 to 2900 blocks of North Norwalk, located north of McDowell Road and east of Greenfield Road. Site plan review. This request will allow for an industrial development. Recommendation is approval with conditions. Item 4I, ZON 22-00593, District 2, within the 4100 block of East Valley Auto Drive, located west of Greenfield Road and north of Baseline Road. Site plan review. This request will allow for an industrial warehouse and office development with contractors' storage yards. Recommendation is approval with conditions. Item 5A, Baseline Logistics Park, District 2, within the 5600 to 5800 blocks of East Inverness Avenue and within the 5600 to 5800 blocks of South Sunview, located east of Higley Road and north of Baseline Road, preliminary plat. This item recommendation is continued to the September 14, 2022 Planning and Zoning Board meeting. Item 5B, Hampton Townhomes, District 5, within the 10,500 block of East Hampton Avenue and within the 1300 block of South 105th Place, located west of Signal Butte Road on the south side of Southern Avenue, preliminary plat. This request will allow for a multiple residence development. Recommendation is approval with conditions.
Okay, thank you. Thank you for that. You've heard the consent agenda. Do I have a motion to approve?
So moved.
Do I have a second?
A second.
All right, we have a motion and a second. Go ahead and vote, please.
Aye.
And
Aye.
Board Member Ayers is an aye, Board Member Sarkisian is an aye. Okay, by your vote of 6 ayes, no noes with 1 absent, you have approved your consent agenda. So Rachel, I'll turn it over to you now.
Yeah, Chair, and if you wouldn't mind correcting for the record, that was the 5 ayes and 2.
Oh, that's right. It was 5 ayes with 1 absent.
Thank you.
And, yeah, and 1 vacant. Thank you. Okay.
Okay, and Chair, I'm sorry, I interrupted you and I didn't hear what you were saying.
No, would you go ahead and have our presentation on agenda item 4D?
Absolutely. So Evan Ballmer will be making that presentation on case ZON 22-00437. Nope. 0005. Let me start over. He'll be making the presentation on ZON 22-00051.
Thank you, Rachel. Chair, board members, this is case ZON 22-00051, which is a request for a site plan modification to allow the development of a new Texas Roadhouse restaurant adjacent to the existing Texas Roadhouse. The subject property is located on the southeast corner of Stapley and the US 60. It's crosshatched on the map here. 2 images of the site. The first is looking at the existing Texas Roadhouse from Stapley Drive. The second image on the right is from the Mesa Grand Center parking lot, looking to the west to give you an approximation of where the new restaurant would be located. The general plan designation is mixed-use activity. This is generally large-scale areas over 25 acres that provide unique shopping and entertainment experiences and generally provide a mixture of different uses. The zoning on the property is light industrial with a council use permit overlay. That CUP was approved in 1998, which allowed for the development of large commercial developments within the LI zoning district. The site plan for the site shows a new approximately 9,200 square foot Texas Roadhouse built directly to the east of the existing Texas Roadhouse. There are 66 parking stalls shown on the site plan. There is a shared parking agreement in place for the Mesa Grand development, which was put in place when the center was developed. When the new building is finished with construction, the existing building would be removed and that area landscaped. The landscaping plan shows primarily mesquites, a few Mexican fan palms, and some red yuccas. Here you can see some elevations of the building. This will be going to design review board in September. The applicant did complete the citizen participation process, which included letters to property owners within 1,000 feet of the site, HOAs and registered neighborhoods within a mile of the site. They did hold a neighborhood meeting in February via Zoom. They did have one attendee who had questions and concerns about parking for the center. If I could back up just a second, a few things that came up at our study session. The board asked about construction and where that would take place, the construction yard and where they would set up. I spoke with the applicant and it was approved to be just on the east side of Texas Roadhouse, as far north on the site as possible, to be hopefully as minimally impactful to adjacent developments as possible. And I did reiterate the fact that the intention with moving the building to the east is that the future restaurant, the patrons to that restaurant would primarily utilize the parking that would be to the east of that site. That being said, it is consistent with the Mesa 2040 general plan as well as the review criteria for site plan review from Chapter 69. Staff is recommending approval with conditions. I'm happy to answer any questions the board might have. The applicant is here as well if the board has any further questions.
Okay. Any questions from board members at this time? Okay, I don't see any questions now. Let me ask the applicant to come forward and address the board.
Good afternoon, Chairman, members of the board. My name is Heather Person. My address is 4601 North 39th Place in Phoenix. I would like to thank Mr. Balmer for that presentation and for clarifying the comment about the construction staging. Texas Roadhouse has been a longtime member of the community, as Board Member Pitcher pointed out. They're very excited to be bringing a new modernized facility and continue that relationship and serving their customers here in Mesa. I would like to respond to a few of the issues that came up in the study session. As Mr. Balmer pointed out, the construction staging is a legitimate concern that we need to address, and we are working with the fire marshal and also with staff to come up with a plan that puts it as far north as possible and in the area east of the building. We think that will be the least impactful to the other tenants, but also for Texas Roadhouse. That restaurant that's there is going to be operating during construction, and we don't want that to be an issue either, right? We think the construction duration should be about 4.5 months. And again, Texas Roadhouse is very motivated to have that be as short as possible, to be a good neighbor and to be a good steward for their customers and their employees. As for the permanent parking, the plan that you reviewed was done with careful consideration and input from staff, including Evan, including Rachel and others. We have done our best as a team to put forth a plan that meets the city's goals and objectives. But that being said, we are open to incorporating some additional parking if the board would like us to consider that. So I have no further questions. I do have John Story here, who is at Texas Roadhouse, as well as Yelena Feaster, our architect, if there are any other technical questions that you'd like to ask them.
Okay, thank you. Questions from board members? I'm not seeing any at the moment, so let's go ahead, and we've got one blue card, so let's
Thank
go
you.
ahead and hear from, thank you. Ryan Bird, would you please state your name and address for the record, and then you'll have 3 minutes to address the board.
Good afternoon, Chairman and members of the board. My name is Ryan Bird. My address is 10575 North 114th Street in Scottsdale, Arizona. I represent the Lot 3 owner, Charleston's building. It's Wasatch Equity Advisors, and that's the building just to the south of the proposed Texas Roadhouse. We are here today to object to the application as it stands now, and we would like further comments and maybe a review of the site plan. The number one objection is the parking. We lose 26 spaces, roughly, based upon the moving of this building to the east in an already tight parking space that has an AMC center in it, which will greatly affect my client and his tenant, Charleston's. If you look at the CC&Rs for this location, they are recorded. And just so if I can read them into the record, just the one section regarding parking. It says the shopping center, this is on number 5, page 24, recorded document 98-032-6335. The shopping center shall at all times contain a number of parking spaces equal to the greater of A, 2,750 full spaces, or 6 parking spaces for each 1,000 square feet of floor area in the shopping center. The site plan that they've proposed doesn't address this total at all. We're losing 26, so we're not sure if they're in compliance with the ECRs for this property. Secondly, they haven't put anything in the site plan to show how we'll recoup the loss of those 26 spaces, especially when they're going to be operating a restaurant while they're constructing a restaurant. So now we have an existing restaurant, we have 26 spaces we're losing, and we have a staging area to the right of that even takes more spaces for 4.5 months on a center that is already struggling with parking, and we get complaints from our tenant regarding that all the time. So the question we have in the comments for the planner and for the applicant is, how many spots in the shopping center are we actually losing? Are they doing anything to recoup those spots? Are they in compliance with the CC&Rs that control this property? In addition to the CC&Rs, we have the construction work, and it says in the CC&Rs that the work has to be a minimal disruption. And I think when you look at where that staging area is and the loss of parking spaces for my client, which is directly to the south of that location, it's not a minimal. It's going to be a major problem for 4.5 months during construction, and then after that, we lose those 26 spaces roughly. Thank you. If you have any other questions.
Let me ask my board members, any questions for Mr. Bird on this? Board Member Pitcher, do you have a question?
Yeah, I do. Why don't we hear from the applicant and see how they...
Yeah, and let me, before we do that, I do have a question for Mr. Bird.
Sure.
So, Board Member Ayers, Board Member Sarkisian, do you have any questions at this point?
I have a question for staff, but not for the applicant, or not for the public right now.
Okay, we'll get back to you on that. Let me just, so Mr. Bird, educate me a little bit. You said that you're talking about the CC&Rs and the number of parking spaces. As you go east from both of these restaurants all the way to the end of the movie theater, there is parking further to the east, and I go have dinner at both of these restaurants on a fairly regular basis. So
Well, thank you.
You can, yeah, I love them both. Really, they're terrific. And I know there's a lot of traffic congestion right around the restaurants, but if you go further east, you can always find a parking space. Now you're hiking a little bit further coming back to the restaurant. But when you talk about the number of spaces you're losing, what's the parking lot that we're talking about? Is the parking lot go all the way to the eastern boundary where the AMC is, or what's the parking area that's covered by the CC&Rs for your client?
The CC&Rs cover the entire development of the Mesa Grand Shopping Center. Each individual, certain pads are owned by Mesa Grande themselves. Other pads are individually owned. But they're all subject to the CCNRs in that whole development.
Okay.
And the issue is to the east where you're talking about, that's where the staging's going to be.
Yeah,
those
but I
4.5
mean,
months.
you can go for a good 100, 200 yards to the east. There's a lot of
Right.
parking on the north side of the AMC. And a lot of the times there's large areas over there that are vacant that you can park in. Like I said, you just have to go further east. But let me ask you this question. Have you had any discussions with Texas Roadhouse yet on this issue?
So I had brief discussions with the original planner. I don't think it was Mr. Balmer. I think it was somebody else, and they got transferred. Since that, no, we just got a notice on the door. Earlier this week, I got an email from a Mr. Hardman, who is the commercial broker that represents the landlord entity for Mesa Grande, just wanting to know what our concerns were. I conveyed those to him. He gave me some information with the site plan and how many parking spots we were actually losing, because we didn't have any of that information, because on the site plan you can't see it. They just moved the building to the east, but it's essentially 2 parking rows, roughly. In the picture, it looks like they're about 10 each, and then some towards the back of the new building. So, and I understand there's a lot of parking to the east, but as you know, people that go to restaurants, they want to park right in front of both
No.
these locations.
No, I know.
So-
I usually drop the family off, drive east, and then I hike back, so I understand liking to be close. Okay. Any questions more for Mr. Byrd? Okay, so I've got, did you want to hear, Board Member Pitcher, did you want to hear from the applicant? Let's bring the applicant back up and then we'll go to staff after that.
Hi again. Thank you, Mr. Byrd, for sharing that for everyone. I would like to respond with respect to the construction staging. It's a little hard to see on that scale of a map, but what we're envisioning is a rectangular shaped construction staging area tucked right up against the freeway frontage on the east side of the building.
So it would be immediately north of where you're going to build the new restaurant, is that right?
North and east. So it would
North
be
and east.
east of the black outlined site area,
Okay.
but as far north as you can get without getting into the landscape or the right-of-way. So I understand the concern, and Texas Roadhouse is also very mindful of that, as I mentioned. Just to clarify too, so the parking that's currently there will not be touched during construction, because what's going to happen so that Texas Roadhouse can keep all their employees employed during this process, they're going to build the new building on the east half of the site, and then they are going to tear down the other building. So they're not intending to impact that parking to the south of the building at all.
Okay, but the parking to the east, you're going to lose parking where the new building is going.
Yes.
And then you're going to lose parking where the staging area is as well, at least
The
while
sta-
you're
For the
staging.
4.5 months,
4.5
right. And
months.
I share Mr. Bird's concern over the parking, but I think that is as far away from Charleston's and is part of our plan, right, to keep that further away from them. One of the ideas for moving the building to the east, we actually think we're going to be more accessible to that parking to the east that you mentioned. And, I'm kind of the same. I feel like I can eat more if I park further away, so I may be in a minority, but our hope is that with the new orientation of the building, we'll be able to be more accessible to some of those stalls that you mentioned. And again, we can certainly talk about looking again at the plan with staff to see about adding some more parking, but we have been working with them to come up with a plan that met the goals and objectives that the city is trying to achieve there.
Okay.
Does that answer your question, Mr. Pitcher?
So I've just got a couple of questions, to his points. He had 3. One is it in compliance with the existing CCNRs after construction?
We believe so, yes. And that 2750 is for the whole center, like Mr. Bird mentioned.
Okay. And the second thing is any of the parking going to be recouped at all?
I don't think so, because we're not, except for the construction staging, we're not touching anything outside of the area that's outlined as the site. And so the parking that's currently shown kind of the south part of that site will still be maintained once the new building is up. But the parking that, I guess, is at the northeast portion of that site area, that's where the new building is going.
Right.
And those are the stalls that are being removed.
And so the third point was disruption. And you've addressed that. So,
Yeah, I mean, we want to be good neighbors, and we're happy to, have our superintendent go over and talk to the store manager and try to do whatever we can. Texas Roadhouse does this a lot. I know Charleston does this a lot with their buildings, and it's really important to, try to minimize the disruption to the extent we can.
Yeah, I too have been to both, so I'm familiar
You
with
get
the
it.
issue.
Any other
Okay.
questions for me?
Any other questions for the applicant? Board Member Peterson.
Heather, what are through the association, the obligations for both the approval to do this modification, but then also for parking, and what's the status of that approval through the association?
Thank you for asking that. Good question. So James Hardman, that Mr. Bird mentioned, he's actually one of the owners of the center. And he and his partner had to get approvals from AMC and I think one other owner because they were either in their lease or in the CCNRs permitted to review and approve. And we've gotten those approvals from them.
Okay, any other questions for the applicant?
Actually, one quick point,
Board
if I
Member
could.
Ayers?
So a couple of things, just in hearing that, by the way, I appreciate that. Having that approval makes me feel a little bit better about it in general. However, just a couple of things. I think moving forward, having those conversations with Charleston's going to be important. I'm going to be honest. I think you're very optimistic, thinking that 4.5 months is going to be enough time to build that. As an architect, I can tell you right now that's very optimistic. And I think there's going to be more impacts, especially with the timing. I'm curious, and this is not our purview, but the curious is kind of the timeframes when you'll be on site working and how that would impact the site. I think there's going to be more impact than you're kind of anticipating as well. So, but with that, I would say having that kind of support and the approvals coming down from the center itself, I feel better about it as well. But I'd say encourage you to have many conversations and do what you can with Charleston's.
Thank you. I appreciate that. The construction timing, we were talking about this earlier in the recess, and just being in Arizona, any construction project that we see, they're usually starting real early and getting out real early. So the good news with that is, I know that Texas Roadhouse does mostly dinner, right? So there won't be an impact there. I'm not as familiar with Charleston's, but I would hope that, if there is disruption, it's not going to be going on the whole day, and frankly, will be done pretty early because people don't want to be out in the heat.
Okay. Board Member Peterson.
Yeah, just one more comment on that and as Board Member Ayers just mentioned, for parking of contractors or people working on that, to have those pushed further to the east too, so that for lunchtime or that type of thing for both Charleston's and Texas Roadhouse, that there's not that they're not in the prime spaces for lunchtime parking, I guess. But you're right, most of them will be gone by early afternoon. It's just that lunchtime.
Well, and we're happy to continue to work with staff and Charleston's to find the best possible place for the construction staging. I mean, we want to keep it close enough that then there's, not a bunch of issues back and forth. But I think, our goal is to make it as minimally impactful as possible.
Good. Thank
Yeah, and I think the point is that construction staging's one thing, but where your employees that are working there park is another. And having them park in a place where it's not going to interfere with the existing restaurant parking would be helpful.
Yeah, and if you give me a moment, John, is that something that you guys can do?
We currently do that.
Okay.
Right now. We don't want that prime parking use for our guests.
Okay, any other questions for the applicant? Board Member Sarkisian, was your question for staff?
Staff question. I don't know if it applies anymore, but I can ask it.
So let's get Mr. Balmer back up here to field this question. Oh, and then you're good. Yeah, remind me of that. While you're doing that, I have one public comment that we received in writing. They asked that it be read into the record. This is Timothy Leskowski, 1332 East Hope Circle. He is in support of this item. His comment says, "I am a patron of Texas Roadhouse who lives just directly north across the freeway. The food service and staff are excellent. The restaurant is so successful that on any given weekend day, there is a waiting line outside. This can be uncomfortable on hot days as well as rainy ones. Parking is a big problem because of the current parking lot configuration. I also feel that there are not enough ADA parking spots. I say this because many of the customers are seniors with disabilities who aren't always able to get an ADA parking spot. In closing, I fully support the renovation and expansion." All right, so with that, Board Member Sarkisian, ask away.
Just to clarify, I believe, tell me if I'm wrong, or the City of Mesa manages the shared parking agreement and making sure that the complex overall is still maintaining what it's required, correct?
Thank you, Chair, Board Member Sarkisian. No, the city does not enforce the CCNRs. That would.
No, I don't mean the CCNRs. That's what I wanted to get to that too, that the city doesn't enforce the CCNRs, but don't we have, so the shared parking agreement is not part of the overall PAD or development plan or anything?
Chair, Board Member Sarkisian, when the shared parking agreement, to my knowledge, was adopted at the time the original development was constructed, I don't believe it was part of the PAD. The site has a CUP that allows for the large commercial development in LI zoning districts, but the shared parking agreement was not part of the original PAD.
Okay, and like you said, we don't have authority over the CCNRs, correct?
That is-
Private matter?
That is correct.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah. Chair and board members, if I could clarify a couple items that came up during discussions as well. There was one question about the permanent parking and if they were replacing any. Just to clarify, there are going to be 13 additional spots that are provided with this new design. If on the site plan, and you might have to zoom in, Evan, but on the south side of the new landscape area, there is going to be a new row of parking that's going to be installed there that will recoup some of those parking spots.
So when we talk about losing 26, you're saying that we're going to get back 13 of the 26?
That is correct, yes. And then to follow up on Board Member Sarkisian's kind of comment is, the city does not enforce the CCNRs, but we as a city look at the overall parking ratios that are required by the city to ensure that the development is still meeting those ratios. So in that sense, the overall shopping center does still have ample parking to meet the required parking per the city.
And the comment we just read about ADA parking, have you looked at that issue and whether the ADA parking is consistent with the requirements?
Yes, and with this new design, those ADA parking spots are actually going to be within that new row that's being provided right there. So there will be 6 ADA parking stalls directly adjacent to the entryway.
So, Board Member Peterson.
So what is the net parking difference from where we are today versus once everything's all built and up and functional?
Yes, thank you, Chair, Board Member Peterson. So the required parking for this would be 122 spaces based on square footage. They are providing 66 spaces. The original site plan, I believe, had 92. I think we're at about a 20-ish stall reduction from what is there currently.
Okay, so minus 20. And then second question is the code for not allowing additional parking, for not allowing parking between the building and Stapley. What is what's the workaround or
Sure.
if the applicant's open for that, what's the, because it seems like it's a little bit of a wasted opportunity there.
Sure. Thank you, Chair, Board Member Peterson. So A couple points on that. First, we have requirements in our zoning ordinance to limit the amount of parking between a building and an arterial roadway like Stapley. We have code provisions that require parking on the side and the rear of the building. This one is a bit of a unique scenario because there is an existing building on the Stapley frontage. And I would like to point out that Charleston's is also right up against the Stapley frontage. We worked with Panera, which is a little farther south. So we've gotten a precedent for all of the buildings along the street frontage. We felt that with the existing building being removed, the closest that we could get to those code requirements would be to include landscaping in front of the building to be more in line with our code requirements that look to move parking to the side and the rear of the buildings and not have it between the front of a building and an arterial street.
So is there a way to add parking there if that's part of the permanent solution?
Chair Board Member Peterson, the reason that we worked with the applicant to come up with this solution was that this was the closest that we could get to our current code requirements. So it is, I guess, something that we could look at, having parking in front of the building, but it's discouraged through our zoning ordinance. So if this was just a clean site, vacant property they're coming in to develop just from the ground up, the requirement we would be looking for is to get that building as close to Stapley as possible to really engage that street frontage. So we're not being able to do that necessarily with this location. We felt that the best engagement with Stapley would not be parking, rather it would be the landscaping, which is how we ended up at this scenario.
So Chair Board Member Peterson, and just to follow up on that question, so including a deviation, it would require a PAD at this point. So we would have to come back, we would have to renotice this item and come back to the board for that motion. Yeah, and just kind of as a background, we did work very closely with the applicant on this design. With the original design of this center, as you can see, those pad centers, they were all directly along Stapley Avenue, and that was, or Stapley Drive, and that was really the intent to provide, you know, that connectivity, that pedestrian connectivity, you know, having the buildings really fronting the street there. So originally, they did come in and propose parking there, which we told the applicant that was not allowed per the code. We've worked with them on solutions to be able to keep that existing building in place while they construct their new building. And as Evan was describing, kind of the solution that came about was being able to pull the landscaping towards the building to achieve that same intent without having them demolish the existing building and reconstruct it in the same place.
You know, I suspect that moving the Texas Roadhouse further east is actually going to help the parking situation around Charleston's in the long run. I do continue to worry about the construction period over the next, 6 months or a year. In the study session, I'd mentioned a good neighbor policy. I know we don't, the city doesn't mandate or enforce those, but it seems to me that that the applicant and the owner of Charleston's could get together and agree on sort of a code of conduct on how things are going to work during the construction period, which is what I'm most worried about. So I don't know, maybe we could get a little feedback on whether something like that could potentially make things better. I think during any construction project, there's going to be inconvenience and an annoyance factor, and things aren't going to work the best way they could while you're building. But like I said, I think over the long run, this is going to be a better situation for both restaurants once the construction's completed.
Yes, thank you, Chair Crockett. So as the applicant previously mentioned, they're willing to work with Charleston's, and maybe I'll let her speak a little bit more about that. But we can, as staff, work when the construction documents come in to make sure that, the staging areas and those things are consistent with what we've discussed today to try to minimize as much impact as we can to both restaurants.
And I'll speak for myself, but that would certainly be my expectation here, that that would happen in this case.
Understood.
Any other questions for Evan before any other questions for the applicant or, I'm not seeing any. Okay. Well, what is your pleasure on this one, board?
I vote to approve the matter, but with conditions and hope that that staff will oversee the construction.
And Board Member Pitcher, if you would make that motion in the form of
Sure.
reading the agenda item for the record, I would appreciate it.
With regard to ZON 22-00051, District 4, within the 1600 block of South Stapley Drive, located south of US 60 Superstition Freeway on the east side of Stapley Drive. This is a site plan modification. The request will allow for the development of a restaurant. The staff recommendation is approval with conditions. I also approve this matter and so move.
Okay, we have a motion, do I have a second?
Second.
All right, we have a motion and a second. Let's go ahead and vote, if you would.
Aye.
Board Member Ayers?
Aye.
Okay, with your vote of 5 ayes and 1 absent, you have passed agenda item 4D. Rachel, is there anything else from staff today?
Chair, I don't have any further announcements.
Okay, anything else from the board members? All right, Board Member Peterson?
Just real quick, in a study session, we talked about this being Leslie's last meeting with her retiring from the city. And so, again, just both, I've only been on the board a short time, but I think for most of her time in the 20-plus years in the planning department that I've had some interaction with her, and it's always been professional and great. I just appreciate all that you've done and wish you the best of luck in the future. Thanks.
And I second those remarks. Thank you, Leslie.
She's all right. No, she's awesome. She knows it. We love her. So thank you. Sorry I couldn't be there for your last, but we'll see you around.
All right. Well, can I have a motion to adjourn our board meeting?
So moved.
A second?
Second.
All right, if you'd go ahead and vote.
Aye.
Aye.
All right, we have unanimously passed the motion to adjourn. Thank you, everybody.